Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to Friends with Death Benefits. I'm your host, Tiff Mussman. I'm flying solo on this episode because Justin is out gigging and doing comedy. So today we are going to be speaking with a really special guest, Jameson Mayberry. He is a local family therapist and has been in the mental health game for some time. We're going to talk about the effects that grief has on your brain, different treatment ideas, and just sort of how we can navigate through grief as it passes through our brain. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm from Riding Solo tonight. It's just me, your host, Tiff Mussman. And I got a special guest here with me, Jameson Mayberry. He's my therapist, and feeling pretty excited about having him. I've been excited about having him on the show since I gave birth to this brainchild. This has been the episode I've been the most excited about doing because the human brain fascinates me, and so we're going to unpack a little bit of what happens to your brain when you're experiencing grief. So welcome to the show, Jameson.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Can't confirm or deny I'm your therapist.
Okay. So he has given me therapy in the past. We'll say that. So I was just saying right before we started the show that it's kind of an interesting change of dynamics here because it's usually me talking and Jameson listening. And so this hour we're going to swap roles a little bit.
Yeah.
And see where it goes. So I may or may not have started seeing Jameson as my therapist. Probably almost 2 years ago. We had come in to see him as a marriage therapist, actually. Kyle and I were going through some marital troubles as couples do. And this is who we were assigned. And I don't know if you say assigned, but it worked out really well. And we have both seen him individually and as a couple, so that's been pretty cool, and continued on to see him through the loss of Ethan. And I had kind of talked to Jameson prior to things happening with Ethan just about seeing a therapist, because I do believe in therapy as preventative medicine. It doesn't always have to be reactive. And I believe that we can use it as a proactive approach, just like if you were going to go to the dentist, the eye doctor, go for your regular checkups. So if things are kind of shitty in your life, you don't have to wait until the other shoe drops to get in and see somebody. So it's a lot more than just sitting across from somebody and talking to somebody, right? I mean, don't you think that's probably people's biggest hang up is, well, I can get this from a friend. Like, I don't want to pay a $20 copay just to talk to a stranger. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Or they have the Dr. Phil in mind. Or, Or laying on the couch,
Oh, yeah.
Like that just are like,
Yeah. What do you say? What would you say are the most preconceived notions about therapy?
Yeah, probably the stuff that they do see on TV.
Yeah.
Like the Dr. Phil and that,
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get yelled at or called out on their stuff and, put in the hot seat. And so,
sure.
Nobody wants to come in and have that done.
No. I mean, it's hard enough to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And like Dr. Phil, you get an hour of Phil McGraw. And
infotainment, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so it takes time, right, to build a relationship between client and
Sure.
and therapist, right? Like,
Yeah.
when do you start usually seeing people start to kind of drop their walls down a little bit?
Usually, probably, I would say on average, probably three or four
Sessions?
right in there. Yeah.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. And you see people for a variety of different...
All kinds, yeah.
All kinds of different things.
Just,
old, young.
Yep, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, shameless plug. I'm in the Willowbrook Mall, so you can find me there.
Yeah, Changes Counseling.
Changes Counseling, yeah. Yep.
So,
but I like the way you put that. I mean, it's, being proactive and, just being healthy, just like, going to the dentist.
Yeah.
And, the doctor or whatever, just to...
Or even like going to the gym.
Yeah, going to the gym.
Yeah, because you have to be able to work your brain.
Yep.
We go to church every Sunday, and that's our spiritual work. Right? So this is just another side of it.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people that I see forever that they come in, now once a month, but they still do it. They still show up, and they still, have things to talk about and things to get better at, like we all do.
Yeah. So is is your approach, I mean, I'm sure it's different with everyone because everybody has different baggage they're carrying in there, but is it more like kind of Q&A, or is it like you're just listening, or is it just based on person to person?
Yeah, for me, it's some people have they use a certain model and that's all they use. But for me, I just, I never know what I'm going to get.
Yeah.
Like most, psychologists or therapists, they're that way too. But it's, I don't have any approach. I just see what they're bringing in and kind of how they, their personality and things like that. And
just got to kind of feel it out.
I guess eclectic would be.
Okay. Very cool. So what's your like credentials? Like, tell us about your schooling and that kind of thing. Like, sell it to us, Jameson.
Okay. Yeah. So my undergrad was at BV here in Mason, and then I went up to the cities for my graduate degree. So you got 2 years post-grad school hours you have to get. So then I got my license. So I'm an LMFT, which is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And then I have a CADC, which is a certified alcohol and drug counselor.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then a MAC, which is a master's of addiction counseling, and an SAP, which is substance abuse professional.
Oh, wow.
And one of the credentials was I worked at Prairie Ridge for about 7.5 years.
Which is a treatment for
center.
People who don't know. It's a treatment center for drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I was at Anastasi's for, at least 5 years.
Okay.
Something like that. And then I started my private practice October 1st of 2019.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's where you're at now.
And that's where I'm at now.
Awesome. Yeah. Just you and your
adorable
receptionist.
Yes.
Who's your wife?
Adorable receptionist. And we have two cute dogs now.
Oh, yeah. Yes, little office dogs.
Yeah, we have Monday, our little Shorky, and Gus, our new one.
Yeah.
And he's a Yorkie Poo.
The cutest little dude.
Yeah.
He's so cute. Yeah. It's the littlest dog I've ever seen in my life. It's so tiny. So, so let's start with like how often do you see somebody come in to see you specifically for grief stuff?
Well, when it first happens, whoever dies in that person's life, it's weekly usually for a period of time. Yeah. I mean, especially if it's a child or a parent or a spouse, something like that, where people are really shaken up.
Yeah. And what's the end goal? Like, because obviously you can't just like hypnotize us and just to forget about it, right? So like, what are people seeking from you?
Well, I think it's something we're all going to experience, and I think it's just being able to vent, but in a way that it's just people are very emotional during that time, so I think they're looking for somebody to listen to, get some feedback, and most people know that there's really nothing I can do or say that at that moment is going to make them feel any better really about what has happened. But I think it's just more of that, which we'll get into in a little bit here, of that connection piece with somebody.
Sure. So when you have people who come in to see you, do you see people who come to see you specifically for grief, or they're in mourning, but it's been some time, like years? So like people who are kind of stuck in this spot.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, and especially, if people are aware of the, the stages, I guess that's, some, information, I guess, or some education that they either got in school, or it's just, they've heard socially or whatever. And they're, because I've had people come in and say, I feel like I'm stuck in depression or anger, that, and they're just saying, everything, I'm just irritable and discontent, and so I feel like I just haven't worked through this grief. Or people that come in for something totally different, but then after talking to them a time or two, they've have unresolved grief that something happened where they had a parent die or something when they were a kid or an adolescent, and they say, that probably did affect me in a way that has led to
you being there, being there. Yeah. So it's manifesting itself in
different ways. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So because you specialized in like the drug and alcohol side of things, like did you see a lot of people with substance abuse issues that were using that as a coping mechanism for loss?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially again, somebody like really close to them that had died, and they kind of get stuck, and they want to escape, and alcohol and drugs is pretty instant gratifying for people, and they can escape whatever they're feeling at the time, and it's very easy for people to want to escape that way, and just self-medicate.
So God, that's so terrifying to think about, though, as somebody who's if I were drinking really heavily through this, which I did after I lost my sister for a good month or two, and was able to kind of recognize that I was medicating myself. But had I stayed on that, I can't imagine how hard it would be to have to reface all that. You know what I mean? Like, so like, what's the alternative? What's the alternative to not numbing yourself out with booze and drugs and, men or women or whatever? Like, what's it look like?
Well, and I think, like, when people start taking alcohol and drugs, like I said, that immediate gratification, so, they're not really patient a lot of times with other avenues. Right. Because, it takes longer. Sure. And so, they can really get stuck in that pattern of just, taking something or drinking something. Yeah. Yeah. So you have to start all over. Like, you have to start from scratch. So that means you're reliving this trauma. Yeah, a lot of times that's what happens, is that, people get sober and all of a sudden they haven't felt what they've needed to feel. Yeah. And they get sober and all of a sudden they have all this pain and all this, stuff that's happening for them. And it's like, why, 3 years later or 10 years later, it's like, well, because you never did deal with it. You were, drinking and drugging, Why is it so important for people to experience it in its entirety? Like, why, like, to really sit in it? Like, just what's the... Nobody wants to, obviously. Right. But like, what's there's obviously significance, it's super important to have to walk through it, because otherwise you're going to end up in trouble somewhere, right? Yeah, and it's almost like you're going to have to at some point, if you, you're going to have to face it at some point. Unless you don't get sober ever. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think the importance is just, being able to, work through things, and just, being able to, get to a place to where, you feel okay with what's happened. God, that seems so weird to be able to say, it like, I can say that really easily about my sister. Like, yeah, I'm okay.
I accept it. I fully accept it. I'm okay with what happened. And I mean, you're never okay with it, but I accept it, and I don't even really have any sorrow over it. And I don't know that if it's because it's overshadowed by this humongoid loss, or if it's because I just really have worked through it. Like, is it possible to work all the way through it? The step or I hate using the stages of grief, because I think people think that you complete a stage, you get a little diploma, and then you move to the next stage. But they really can just resurface, and in any no particular order. But is it possible to just be through that, to have fully walked through it and be like, yep, this is what happened? And I
think you get to a place to where it may seem like a stage, but just acceptance.
Yeah.
Where you're okay with
Yeah.
What has happened. And that's different for everybody. That looks different for everybody, because grief isn't something that you can think your way out of it.
Yeah.
You almost have to experience what you experience. You can't think yourself well.
Right. And I think, and I'm sure you would agree, that there's most people think that have not ever stepped foot into a professional therapist's office, that they think they got it. They got a grasp on it. And some people don't need therapy to be able to get better or work through it or whatever. Maybe they use physical activity, and maybe they lean really heavily on their faith or whatever. But you got to work through it somehow. Yeah. Because
I believe you do.
Yeah. And my belief is that you cannot do it alone. I don't know anyone who has successfully walked this weedy path alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what the research is really telling us, is that the best way to work through grief and to get to a place where you're comfortable or accepting it is through like social engagement, like social medicine almost, where it's like you have a connection with others,
right? And
that really, and exercise. Exercise seems to be like the answer for everything, but it's the connection, the social engagement part is like huge.
So tell me about because we've talked about this, like, what's the connection to processing grief, trauma, anxiety, depression? What's the correlation with that with physical activity?
Well, just, and anxiety and grief are also like, similarly related in the brain, just the chemical reaction that happens. And so, we talk about like exercise to people for depression and anxiety to, get the blood pressure up and, get the cardio going and increase your blood flow and all that, and burn the cortisol, and to get the natural chemicals that we have in our brain bouncing around more than when you're just sitting on the couch watching TV. Just being able to stimulate the areas in the brain that need to be stimulated. And so
what happens to the brain when it's hit with like a Mack truck with a like what happened to my brain when I saw my son code?
Yeah, it's, you experience like trauma.
Yeah.
It was like, trauma that, there's simple and complex trauma, but it was, a traumatic event. And basically your fire alarm in your brain, which is the amygdala, just is like out of control. And it's the same as like somebody that has PTSD or trauma like that. It's the same thing that happens.
That's what makes you feel all scrambly. Is that like, So
Yeah.
the fire alarm is usually what tells you like something's wrong, or like what
Yeah.
is the amygdala like? What's the responsibility of that part of your
Yeah,
brain?
it's basically the fight, flight, or freeze.
Okay.
Yep.
So when you experience something super traumatic like that, it just doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Goes
Yeah,
haywire.
I mean, there's something like 14,000 chemical reactions that happen. It's
Wow.
numbers crazy. It's
Okay.
it's really up there. So, you have all that, and basically, when we do therapy, we talk about with trauma or grief or anxiety. It's more of like bottom up therapy, where you try to manage the amygdala,
Okay.
and then work on having the client calm down
Sure.
and get to a calm place, and then do therapy. Whereas like top down approach is more like cognitive stuff.
Okay. Because the effects of that part of your brain can last for
Yeah.
a long time, right?
Yeah, there's a thing called grief brain
okay.
that
What's
talks
that?
about people that experience just they can't sleep, they can't concentrate, they're just all over the map.
Yeah.
Again, the amygdala is overactive, and then there's a part that's the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of the brain. So that's decision making, choices, judgment. Underactive, it becomes underactive, so people feel like
Yeah.
all over the map and
Right.
can't concentrate, and
Yeah.
their memory sucks, and
Yeah.
that whole thing.
Like I wasn't able to drive even. Like you just kind of forget things. And I
Yeah.
know we've talked about that. Like you're foggy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
Foggy's a good descriptive
Yeah.
word of it. And your emotional regulation in the brain, which is like the anterior cingulate cortex, which is where you regulate emotion, and basically that's underactive too.
Okay.
So then you're kind of one minute you can be laughing, and then
Yeah.
crying
Yes.
a minute later.
And it makes you look crazy and
Yeah.
feel crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's been however long, and I still have those. They're fewer and further between, but they still happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how long can you see people in that kind of haywire, like misfiring type? Can this be like a lifetime thing if you're not seeking, like, where people just absolutely lose their mind?
Yeah, I think after time, it gets to a place to where you're, it just kind of normalizes for you,
Right.
But
Starts to regulate
yeah,
itself.
yeah,
Yeah. So, what are the approaches of therapy? So, when I first started seeing my old therapist after I lost my sister, I had a lot of trauma attached to that just because of what I saw with
Yeah.
the suicide and all that good stuff. And I remember telling her, even just as clear as I was just having a conversation with her, sitting with her, I could see these images just like playing like a movie reel, even though I'm just having, we're making eye contact, we're having a conversation, but it's playing almost like in front of her, like in front of the person I'm talking to. So what is that? Why does that happen? Why does your brain get stuck in that traumatic thing? So, like Ethan, I just kept going back to the smells of the hospital,
yeah,
the color of his skin, his eyes, the drool on the side of his face. Like, why does it stay there? Why does it replay?
yeah, and that's the trauma of it, is just those things that you remember, all those those memories that are basically imprinted
Yeah.
in your memory from the amygdala and hippocampus, which is like I always think of the file cabinet,
Okay.
in your brain, that you have these memories, and they're they're basically just stuck, and that's why with trauma we try to get them unstuck and work through them instead of them being stuck. And that's a lot of times, especially early on, people all those images are really vivid.
Yeah, everything down to like smell. I mean, you can smell it.
Absolutely.
And so there's parts of your, and I think you even explained this to me, so there's kind of like a flap in your brain, sort of like that, just normally like how you would have a memory in the hippocampus area of your brain, it just keeps reshuffling itself, and it gets stuck in this little flappy part of your brain, and it just keeps going and going and going and replaying. And so
because most of our normal thoughts, day-to-day stuff, go through, and they get to the prefrontal cortex, and we just think about it. But the trauma ones get stuck in the limbic system, part of the brain where all that stuff is, and just replay. Yeah, it's almost like a record, that's got a scratch in it.
Right. So what's the approach to unsticking?
Well, you work through it. You do there's therapy out there specifically for trauma, like EMDR is one, and that's been the flavor of the month for many years now. And I did that after my sister died. So can you explain to the listeners what that is? What's it stand for? Yeah, it's eye movement desensitization. I forgot what the R is for, but it has to do with like eye movement, and you actually do a lot of eye movement type therapy. And you work through the trauma. So again, you can get the record player that's stuck, you can get those to move through and become new pathways and get out of there, basically. Is how that works. And there's a lot of it at the beginning is just and again, it's bottom up, so you're trying to calm down the amygdala, and so there's a lot of what I want to say, just kind of like meditation and things like that, to where you just really want to calm the mind and the body down before you get started. And then you tend to work through these traumas. You find things that you can, what I want to say, different ways to look at it. Instead of remembering the negative. So there's a lot to it. It's kind of difficult to explain it all, but it's it's also like turning negative thoughts into positive thoughts and coming at it that way.
Interesting.
Because you did it. What was your experience?
So my experience with EMDR was I had these two little like paddles or whatever that I would hold in the palms of my hand, and it would. My therapist at the time was controlling the speed of the paddle, so it would bounce from my left to right hand. The vibration, and I want to say it was going faster when we were talking about the trauma. And then so you establish like a safety zone, a safe place, or she called it the container theory. So you would create this container in your brain, and or a safe place that you can go or whatever. And I know that we did this a little bit after Ethan. And so you first establish the safety zone, and then you work through the trauma. She asked me questions, I talk about it, explain as much in detail as you possibly can, as far as like what you saw, what you're feeling about what you saw, that sort of thing. And then, or maybe it was, we talked about how I felt about it. And then as I was talking about my feelings about it, she would slow the paddles down. and then eventually, so it's almost like it elevated my heart rate, you know, just, you know, I mean, talking about the trauma itself obviously is going to make your blood pressure sky high.
Yeah.
And then just going back to this sort of safe space, you know, and my experience, so I did it for about a month, and I was going twice a week because I was really rocked by that.
Sure.
And not really experiencing grief in that way before, traumatic loss like that. I mean, I'd lost people, but not in such a horrendous way. But the effects that it had on me were really interesting. So I would always leave there. I always had a headache. And for some reason, every time for me, it was the grocery store. I don't know why, but if I were to go in public, go to the grocery store later that day, I would just spontaneously burst into tears, just for no reason, nothing to remind me or anything. And that had never happened to me before, just for no reason, just spontaneously crippling almost, like just, I don't want to say sadness, but just a need. It was like a need to just get it out, like take the emotional trash out. And that happened to me probably 3 or 4 times after a session. And again, I always had kind of the headache kind of thing, but she said that was a normal response to it. So, and I don't know really why that is. But like what you were saying is it makes new pathways in your brain, right? The theory is that the EMDR creates new pathways. So I don't know if that's just how I was able to process through it, and those were the sort of the fallout or whatever of it. But after about a month of those sessions, I no longer saw the images like I saw them, but they were different. I don't know, and I'm not sure how to really articulate that.
Like
but
desensitized almost?
yeah,
Like,
yes. It was like, I don't want to say like, it was like not that big of a deal anymore, you know?
Yeah.
And I still feel that way. Like I was thinking about it earlier this morning, just to like, oh yeah, I miss her, you know, miss having her around or whatever. But it's not like oh my God, you know, like I can't do this. And usually always followed with that was, oh my gosh, remember what you saw? Remember the thing? Remember the things you saw. And then you get stuck there, and then it was just gross. It was this weird cycle of thoughts and stuff. And now it's just like, oh man, I miss her. Oh yeah, remember that thing that happened? That was crazy.
Yeah.
And then it just doesn't go beyond that. It's really weird. It's really, really weird.
Yeah, and that reminds me, I think the R, with what you're just talking about, the R stands for reprocessing, I believe.
Oh, wow.
EMDR.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, you just totally process it completely different. It becomes just facts to you.
Yeah.
And not this thing that happened to you. It's just like, yep, these are the facts. And I know that sounds really cold to people who are probably listening to this, but what's your alternative? You know, like it's because if you're even considering at all doing a therapy like EMDR, because of trauma that you've experienced, like you're in it and you're living it right now. So there is these incredible techniques out there, and I didn't think it would work. I didn't think it would work because, you know, like it's sort of like
some of it is like it's like
kind of hokey,
yeah,
right?
It's kind of hooey stuff.
And like
because it's like you said with paddles, like there's some drumming that can be done, and some other thing, tapping.
Yeah, I've seen where you can tap on your, because there's some like kind of take home homework you can do when you go home too, you know, and so like you can use it for anxiety, you can do it, you know, and so it's
absolutely.
Yeah. So so that was my experience with it. And so
it sounded like it worked for you.
Yeah, it really did. Yeah. And I think the residual side effects of it still continue to work, because if it hadn't really created different paths in my brain, I would still be there.
Right. Exactly.
And so it really is, it's very interesting and it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so, But so when I came to you after Ethan, that was my first question was like, yo, Jameson, I need to do this thing. And, but it was just, you had a different technique. So
we tried,
let's talk about that.
Yeah. The rewind technique. So we tried that, and I think you had pretty good results with what happened.
Yeah.
Cause that was probably a week or two after.
It wasn't very long. Yeah. I mean, it was still really fresh and new, but it was like, that's why I knew it was really important to get in to you, because since I was with Ethan that entire 8 days prior to that, I saw a lot of things, and I couldn't, it was much, much heavier than just like losing your child. It's like slowly watching your child die over 8 days. Yeah. And so I was in a pretty dark spot where it was like I couldn't eat, I wasn't sleeping, because it was just all I saw. And it was really hard, I think, for people to relate to me, the other parents and stuff of Ethan to relate to me, because I was in just such a way different spot than they were. And I felt a lot of guilt because of that. You know what I mean? Like, because I didn't want to, I couldn't express what I was experiencing because I didn't really even know what I was really experiencing. It was just, all I knew was that I was stuck in this space I had been in before. Yeah. I had been in this spot before. So we tried a technique called the rewind. Yeah.
And it's just kind of with where you're at, and it being such a short period of time, it was a technique just kind of, it was emergent, and so just a quick little thing to try, and basically it's you just kind of it's kind of like you get the person to dissociate a little bit, and so it's not so intense, and really it's about like watching yourself on a movie screen. Yeah. Go through what you went through, and
So basically what Jameson did during that particular therapy was, so to, like you said, disassociate myself, picture myself in a movie theater, turn the lights down a little bit, and it, very still and
very comfortable.
Yeah, comfortable, kind of, controlling your breath, that kind of thing. And then also did similar to what I had done with EMDR, which was creating a space. Place, which for me was the ride down to Iowa City in the Jeep. Ethan and I just had this super awesome, conversation for 3 hours, and it was seriously the best, just still continues to be just the best moment that I've had with him in 22 years. But so that was my safe space. So then you basically relive the trauma, whether or not it's, for me, it felt like it was over a week. So, I'm watching myself relive this week with Ethan. Everything from him getting taken off the ventilator right away to, the good moments, and then having, all the setbacks and the smell of the iodine and the sounds of the beeping and the restlessness of Ethan and the sleeplessness for me. And then just, you're just watching out as much as you can in detail. Right. Which is kind of crazy to do, because your brain again is just so scrambly, but somehow it does it. I don't know. And so then you play it all the way out to the most climactic moment. And that's the code, obviously, in the bathroom with Ethan. And for me, that was the most traumatic moment. Even though we had to take him off life support 2 days later, that moment was the most traumatic, just because I knew what I had seen. And it's haunting. So that to me was this, super pinnacle moment. And then right when you get to that moment, you hit this rewind button. And you described it as sort of like an old VHS tape. So
Yeah.
you would watch it rewind itself in front of you on the screen as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah.
Back to the Jeep. And, that was crazy.
Yeah.
was
And you did it, I think, twice.
We did it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've done it since, like in the week to follow that. Anytime I felt like I was, even just that experience in your office that one time was enough to be able to chip away at it a little bit, where it wasn't quite as intense. It was still definitely there, and I was still experiencing it to a degree, but not to the level that I was before. So that I just had implemented it a little bit at home. And I still have moments where I have to kind of use that, but it was really, really effective to be able to do that. Is there risk to doing that at home and not to doing it in a controlled environment like your therapist's office?
I think it depends on the person, but yeah, there's risk in any of it really. I mean, it's, if it's too soon and, people can't manage themselves and, I would say office only.
Yeah.
Type of thing,
Yeah.
type of thing. But,
Yeah.
because grief is, it's an emotion. It's, and 3 things that go into our emotions are like our physical sensations and core affect, which is, it's good or bad.
Yeah.
And then the thoughts about it. So, you have some cognitive stuff in there, and you have, some physical stuff in there, and some emotional stuff in there. And
what do you see? I think people don't think that grief manifests itself physically on you, but it very much does. So
sure,
what's your experience with that? Like, what do you see the most of?
Probably the people that say, I feel like I'm in a fog.
Yeah.
That's probably the one that I hear the most. But, there's, like I said, it can act similarly to anxiety. So, stress and anxiety, what it does to a body,
Yes.
over time and
Yes.
that kind of stuff, especially sleep and things like that.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Why can't people sleep when they're experiencing?
I think for me, I think it's just too much on the mind. I think that the brain is just so active with, again, thousands of chemical reactions going on that, they're just, people are thinking about this and almost like feeling wired, that brain racing and things that are going on.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how your body needs sleep so much. I mean, you're up there in the hospital for 8 days, no sleep, and then you have 2 more days of just trying to figure out if this kid's going to make it or not. And I wasn't sleeping, but your body is so, it's malnutrition, and you're just dragging around this 160-pound skin sack, but your brain is just not allowing you to shut it down. It's really bizarre.
It is.
It's really, really bizarre.
Yeah.
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 I don't know. But eventually you just have to, and I actually called my doctor while I was up there and said, I need you to prescribe me something for anxiety and sleep, just because I knew the day before, we knew we were going to do the thing. I knew I needed to be, in the best shape I possibly can. So yeah, we did. I had to kind of chemically induce that, which is kind of against my code normally, but you just do what you got to do at the time. Sleep's so crucial.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, that's how your brain heals. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But it can go the other way too.
Because it's it's nervous, you can get no sleep. It's nervous breakdown time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't have anything that can calm you down,
right.
you just, and some people, they get on antidepressants, even if it's for a year.
Yeah.
just to help them get through the first year. And again, if I were to bang anything to death, it would be the social medicine stuff. So, your friends and, because our tendency is to pull in, not go out, isolate.
Yeah.
And, stay in bed or, lock the door, close the blinders and not let, I don't want to talk to anybody today. And that's our natural tendency, but, really pushing yourself to, be with friends.
Yeah.
Engage in social activities and exercise, of course.
Yeah. And I try to, I would say if you're like in, if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel in a new season of grief, you're going to have people that are going to say to you, it's okay to take time. It's okay to sleep all day if you need that. And people mean well, they really, really do. But I think you have to keep in the back of your head, you cannot stay there because it is so easy to stay there. And what we know about grief and the social experience with grief is that all the people that are bum rushing you in the beginning and they're giving you all of this advice 2 months down the road are nowhere to be found. And so they've left you with this piece of advice that says, okay, yeah, Tiff, if you need to sleep all day, and that's all you remember because they're not there cheering you on like, hey man, you got to get up. It's time to, so you have to really listen to your own internal dialogue, like, okay, I've been in the same grubby t-shirt and sweatpants for 3.5 weeks. It's time you got to push yourself.
There's a time where it becomes more detrimental than it does doing you any good. And that's kind of what I meant about you can't think your way out of it. Because the thinking part of the brain is that's a good idea. It actually is pretty intelligent for us to think like that. I'm just going to isolate and do this on my own.
Right.
But we know that that's not what is good.
Right. Right. Because, you'll stay there. You will absolutely stay there. Especially if you're, and I said this a million times on this show, if you're trying to go this alone, you will stay there. You will stay in that spot, in that grubby t-shirt and in those sweatpants because you ain't got nobody to look good for, But you have to attach yourself to at least one person,
Yeah.
And now that we live in the age of technology, it's impossible not to be able to connect with another person. So
Right.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to ask you this, but because we can do this now casually. Yeah. What's been your experience with loss?
My experience has been I've lost both of my parents already, so both of them to cancer. And I saw both of them get to 90 pounds, and so that was pretty difficult. And pets. I mean, I've dogs especially.
Yeah. Because you don't have kids. Your kids are your animals.
Right. Yeah. They're the kids. And so it's, we lost one of our dogs in November. It was Friday the 13th. I remember well. And so, just losses like that have been, for me, I've experienced it. Like I said, it's, most of us do by the time we get to 50 years old.
Yeah.
But I think I never got to a place to where it was debilitating, I guess, just because I have hope of what comes next and, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And watching, some paranormal caught on camera with these, with these, footages that people have from their home security of their loved ones coming back and actually visiting the home and catching them on camera. It's and pets too.
Yeah.
They
Have you had any experiences like that?
I have not, but
Yeah.
the ones that I've seen on that program are just like they blow me away, and they give me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Just because it's like
Gives you
the last one I saw was the security footage, like out front in her front yard and up to her door and stuff. They had a swing on there, and you can see like this ghost basically
Wow.
sit down on that swing where they used to sit, and
Yeah.
it's like stuff like that. Just it sounds crazy, but
Yeah.
it just
I find that so fascinating because you know so much about the human brain that it's like, because we as human beings, especially like free thinkers, like we can explain anything away, right? Like, but when it comes to like paranormal stuff,
yeah.
sometimes it just is. I mean, I do believe, and we're actually gonna touch on that in an episode, just the afterlife, and what people who have gifts to be able to speak to the other side, or like the things that we think we see that we're not sure we see, and that kind of thing. So how old were you when you lost your parents?
Well, I'd have to do the math, which would take me like 10 minutes. So my dad was 54.
Okay.
And my mom was 67. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, they were, young, for today's standards, I guess. And
both from cancer.
yeah, both from cancer.
Does that, death always makes us think about our own demise.
Yeah.
So because you lost both your parents to cancer, like, did that start to like freak you out about, you getting cancer?
Yeah, it does. You definitely think about that.
Yeah.
Because my sister had, she caught it early enough. She had breast cancer, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's a family history for sure.
Yeah. Wow. So do you think the leg up that you have as far as like, and I feel this way about myself, like, and I lean really heavily on my faith, and I think that God just doesn't allow me to stay in a dark place for very long. And I believe that is his hand on me, because there's no I should, by all rights, and I have not shared my life story or anything like that, be dead or addicted or, strung out somewhere. But I've never been able to stay in darkness for too long. And do you think that your leg up is because of what you believe in the afterlife, or is it like what you know about how to condition your brain because of what you know about psychology and that sort of thing? Do you think it's a combination of both?
Yeah, I'd say a combination for sure.
Yeah. So the techniques on how to like. What do you? What was the hardest part for you? Like, what did you struggle with the most, losing your parents, watching that? And
just the permanency of it, just that
finite.
Yeah. Especially like the first year, when you go through the traditions and things that you would, went to my mom's on Thanksgiving every year, and Christmas time every year, it's just those things that are different now. And
you know what really sucks are the first you don't think about. You know what I mean? Like those things you can prepare for, like Christmas is coming, Easter, all the things are about birthdays. But it's like the dumb shit you don't think about, like the first time you have to like move the shoes from out underneath the piano to sweep, or the first snowfall, like Justin and I have talked about that. It's like those sneak attacks that are so difficult. It's just like a sharp left hook, just knock you down. You could be having like the best day and it just totally knock you off your feet.
Yeah,
it's pretty nuts. I hate
Definitely.
it. I hate it.
Yeah,
I hate it a lot. Yeah. Do you think it's possible for people to not become clinically depressed, like chemically depressed and go through an extensive amount of loss in their life. You know, like people ask me often, like, are you on anything? Well, I am, but it isn't legal. But no, like, you know, are you taking medication? You know, and I'm like, well, I'm not depressed. And I've talked to my doctor about that. Like, I am not depressed. I'm situationally depressed.
Yeah.
But I don't, that's possible, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I just...
Do you like, I mean, yeah, and like, it's like, should I be on something? Because everybody thinks I should be.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it can manifest in other ways too, just shopping, sex, things that you don't ingest, gambling, a lot of those things can be, an escape, just like alcohol and drugs can be too,
Yeah.
Things that, people don't necessarily think about, risky behaviors or, the casino. I mean, a lot of people, even TV. I mean, screens have a tendency to put us in a trance, right? So it's like we get tunnel visioned on whatever we're looking at, and everything is out. The problems and issues are out here, and we forget about them for a couple hours, and and people can get, really addicted to that, just that escape.
Yeah.
Like, people, pornography, it's like a lot of times it's not about the sex, it's about other things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I guess the way I look at it is I feel like I would, actually, I think all crazy people probably say this, like, I feel like I would know if I needed to be on medication. That's the stupidest thing ever to say that. But like, I just don't feel depressed. I mean, I have moments of disparity. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's just because you've experienced something super traumatic, a divorce, loss of a pet, a loss of a child, a loss of a parent, whatever, it doesn't mean that you need to be medicated, because there's a lot of other avenues, right?
Right.
Diet, exercise, social medicine. That's the biggest takeaway, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. For me.
Those connections are huge, having connections and
right. Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a variety of different treatments available for people in a variety of different losses and experiences, and you're kind of a universal donor in that way. Like you're just going to take it from whatever avenue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what your client basis looks like, but if you are seriously considering seeing somebody for your own mental health, for preventative health, for proactive stuff, if your marriage is suffering, Jameson's incredible. He's really, 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 really helped me trudge through some difficulties in my relationship with Kyle and now in my relationship with grief. So,
well, thank you for those kind words.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I'm kind of shopping for a new therapist because I would like to hang out with you, like as a social person. But no, you're super great. So yeah, and I'll put up some information as far as contact information for Jameson at Changes Counseling on our Facebook page. So, and if you have questions relating to today's episode, don't hesitate to reach out. Be happy to answer anything for you, and I can bounce some stuff off of Jameson too. And, we can follow up with you. So, Jameson, this was great. Again, I was super excited about doing this episode, and I know there's probably so much more we can probably cover it, and maybe we'll have you back again, as things kind of start to unravel or fall apart or whatever. But I just appreciate your insight to the human condition. And you're sharing your experiences with us. Yeah. So
anytime.
Anytime, he says. You guys heard it. So if he comes back on the show, like, he can't fight me about it. Hey, for all of you, though, that are out there listening tonight, we are walking this with you, and we appreciate your love and your support. You're not in this alone. And until we meet again, hang in there.